Humanity's past is written in codes that few can decipher, and Lemuria represents the key that unlocks the doors to our true cosmic origin. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. Imagine a vast continent, bathed by the waters of the Pacific Ocean, where beings of elevated consciousness walked among crystal temples and mastered energies we now consider supernatural. A place where connection with the cosmos wasn't merely a spiritual practice, but the very essence of daily existence. This isn't the setting of a science fiction work, but the description of Lemuria, the lost continent that preceded our current civilization. The story of Lemuria remains shrouded in mystery, whispered among esoteric circles, and preserved in ancient texts that few have had the opportunity to study deeply. Today, we'll reveal secrets that will transform your understanding of the origin of human consciousness and its dormant spiritual potential. Lemuria emerges in the pages of The Secret Doctrine, Helena Blavatsky's monumental work published in 1888. In these volumes, the founder of the Theosophical Society presents Lemuria as the cradle of humanity's third root race, beings who inhabited Earth long before the civilizations we study in conventional history books. What makes Lemuria fascinating is both its spiritual significance and its chronological position in human evolution. According to Blavatsky, this continent existed millions of years ago, when the configuration of continents differed drastically from today's. It stretched across what we now know as the Pacific Ocean, with parts reaching what would currently be Madagascar, Australia, and portions of India. The Lemurians weren't simply an advanced civilization. They represented an entirely different stage of human evolution. Beings of imposing stature, with natural psychic abilities and a direct connection to cosmic energies. Their consciousness functioned in ways we now attempt to recover through intensive spiritual practices. Lemuria's geography reflected its mystical nature. Vast mountain ranges housed temples built with giant crystals, capable of channeling cosmic energies. Lakes of crystalline waters served as natural portals to higher dimensions. The air vibrated with harmonic frequencies that facilitated elevated states of consciousness. But how can we be certain of Lemuria's existence? Conventional science hesitates to recognize lost continents without concrete geological evidence. However, there are intriguing clues that challenge skepticism. Geological anomalies on the Pacific Ocean floor, inexplicable similarities between species on currently separated continents, and primarily, the preservation of this knowledge in diverse spiritual traditions around the world. In Pacific Islands, oral narratives speak of submerged ancestral lands. In India, ancient texts mention pre-Diluvian civilizations with incomprehensible technologies. In Tamil literature, we find references to Kumari Kandam, an advanced land that disappeared beneath the waves. Many esoteric scholars identify clear parallels with Lemuria. What happened to this extraordinary civilization? Why did a people with such spiritual mastery disappear from the face of the earth? The answer to this question leads us to understand cosmic cycles that transcend our linear conception of time and evolution. Have you ever felt an inexplicable connection to knowledge you never formally studied? Ever experienced déjà vu when hearing about ancient spiritual practices? Perhaps your soul carries dormant Lemurian memories, waiting to be awakened. The journey to unveil Lemuria has only begun. What we'll discover next about their spiritual practices will challenge everything you thought you knew about the potential of human consciousness. Lemurian spirituality transcended any religious system we know today. While our modern practices often separate the spiritual from the everyday, for Lemurians this division simply didn't exist. Every action, thought, and creation emanated from a consciousness unified with the cosmos. Blavatsky describes in The Secret Doctrine that Lemurians possessed what she called a physical and functional third eye, not metaphorical, but an actual organ of spiritual perception. This organ allowed direct vision of higher realities and communication with cosmic intelligences. Over time, this third eye atrophied, becoming the pineal gland we all possess today, a dormant vestige of capabilities that were once natural to humanity. Lemurian meditative practices differed fundamentally from those we know. While today we struggle to silence the mind and achieve altered states of consciousness, Lemurians naturally inhabited multiple dimensions of perception. Their meditation didn't seek to transcend physical reality, but to harmonize the different layers of reality they simultaneously perceived. The Lemurian scrolls, texts channeled by Satguru Sivaya Subramania Swami in the 20th century, suggest that Lemurians utilized sacred sounds, primordial mantras, not just as tools for spiritual elevation, but as practical technology to manipulate matter and energy. Sound vibrations served as the interface between consciousness and physical manifestation. A fascinating aspect of Lemurian spirituality was their relationship with crystals. They didn't use crystals merely as tools, but as conscious extensions of their own perception. Large crystals served as living libraries, storing knowledge and experiences that could be directly accessed by consciousness. Some contemporary mystics claim that certain crystals found today, particularly the so-called Lemurian seed crystals, contain fragments of this ancestral knowledge, accessible through meditative attunement. Rudolf Steiner, in his work, The Submerged Continents of Atlantis and Lemuria, describes how Lemurians possessed natural capabilities of clairvoyance, telepathy, and bilocation. Their connection with the plant world allowed direct communication with plant intelligence, resulting in a holistic medicine that integrated body, mind, and spirit through advanced botanical preparations. Lemurians understood the human body as a microcosm of the universe. Each organ, each system, corresponded to a constellation, a planet, or a cosmic force. This understanding enabled healing practices that worked simultaneously on the physical body and subtle bodies, restoring harmony through alignment with cosmic patterns. The Lemurian relationship with time differed radically from ours. While we live trapped in a linear perception, they experienced time as a multidimensional field. This allowed practices of temporal navigation, the ability to consciously access the past and glimpse potential futures. This ability underpinned their capacity for conscious evolutionary planning. Perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of Lemurian spirituality was their understanding of death. For them, the transition between incarnations was a conscious and controlled process. Unlike our current experience, where death represents a traumatic rupture, followed by spiritual amnesia, Lemurians maintained full consciousness during the transition, preserving memories and learnings between lives. Lemurian social structures reflected this elevated consciousness. There were no rigid hierarchies based on power, but a natural organization founded on the level of spiritual development. The most advanced served as guardians of knowledge, guiding others on the path of conscious evolution. Have you ever felt an inexplicable affinity with specific spiritual practices when experiencing them for the first time? Have you had profound insights during meditations that seem to come from a source of knowledge beyond your current experience? These might be cellular memories of your connection with Lemurian consciousness. But what caused the decline of this spiritually advanced civilization? What could destroy a culture with such mastery over the forces of nature and consciousness? The answer leads us to the next chapter of this extraordinary story, a cosmic event that forever altered the course of human evolution. The disappearance of Lemuria wasn't a sudden event, but a gradual process aligned with greater cosmic cycles. Blavatsky describes in The Secret Doctrine that the continent's submersion occurred over thousands of years, beginning approximately 850,000 years ago and concluding around 700,000 years ago, a time scale that challenges our conventional historical understanding. Contrary to simplistic narratives of sudden catastrophes, the theosophical perspective suggests that Lemuria's decline represented a necessary transition in the evolution of human consciousness. The continent wasn't destroyed by a random disaster, but submerged as part of a cosmic plan for humanity's evolution. James Churchward, in The Lost Continent of Mu, presents a complementary view, suggesting that the continent faced a series of geological cataclysms related to imbalances in subterranean gas chambers. This perspective, though more materialistic, doesn't necessarily contradict the esoteric view. Physical processes can be manifestations of evolutionary necessities on higher planes. The most intriguing aspect of this process was the conscious preparation of Lemurians for their own transition. Unlike modern apocalyptic narratives, esoteric records indicate that Lemuria's spiritual guardians perfectly understood the ongoing cosmic cycles. They didn't try to resist the inevitable, but dedicated themselves to preserving their knowledge for future ages. This preservation occurred on multiple levels. On the physical plane, selected groups migrated to lands that would remain above water, taking with them sacred texts and power artifacts. Mountainous regions that today form parts of Tibet, the Himalayas, the Andes, and certain Pacific islands received these guardians of Lemurian knowledge. On the etheric plane, Lemurian masters created what we might call Akashic libraries, repositories of knowledge accessible through elevated states of consciousness. These libraries don't exist in physical space, but in subtle dimensions where information remains unaltered by time. Perhaps the most fascinating method of preservation was the encoding of Lemurian knowledge in human DNA itself. Through processes that our science is only beginning to glimpse, Lemuria's sages managed to incorporate essential aspects of their wisdom into the genetic structure of specific lineages, creating a cellular memory that could be activated in future cycles of humanity. As waters advanced over Lemuria, the rise of another center of advanced consciousness, Atlantis, occurred simultaneously. Many Lemurians migrated to this new continent, contributing to its initial development. However, the two civilizations represented distinct expressions of human evolution. While Lemuria emphasized spiritual integration and harmony with natural forces, Atlantis would develop a greater focus on technological manipulation of matter. The last days of Lemuria were marked by sacred transition ceremonies. In the remaining temples, priests and priestesses performed rituals to consciously release the energy of sacred sites, transferring it to new spiritual centers. Master crystals were programmed with future activation codes and deposited in underground or oceanic chambers, where they would remain dormant until the appropriate time for rediscovery. The oral traditions of various indigenous Pacific cultures preserve memories of this period. In the Hawaiian Islands, legends speak of Mu, or Kahupo, Okan, the ancestral land from which the first kahunas came. In New Zealand, the Maori keep stories of Hawaiki, the land of origin beyond the ocean. These narratives, transmitted through generations, contain encoded fragments of Lemurian history. The submersion process represented not just the end of a physical civilization, but a fundamental transformation in the very nature of human experience. As Lemuria disappeared, humanity transitioned from a state of natural multidimensional perception to a consciousness more focused on the material plane, a necessary condition for the development of specific aspects of human evolution. Have you ever reflected on why so many cultures around the world share myths of lost continents and great floods? Could it be possible that these narratives preserve, in symbolic language, the collective memory of the Lemurian transition? But the physical disappearance of Lemuria didn't mean the end of its influence. Its legacy continued to shape humanity's spiritual development through occult channels and periodic manifestations. How this ancestral knowledge survived and continues to influence our spiritual journey to this day is the next revelation in our exploration. After Lemuria's physical submersion, its knowledge didn't completely disappear. It transformed into an underground current that continued flowing through human history, periodically emerging in various spiritual traditions around the world. The main repositories of this knowledge were the mystery schools established by Lemurian migrants. These schools, operating under various names and forms, kept the essence of ancestral teachings alive, adapting them to the evolutionary needs of each era. In ancient Egypt, initiation temples preserved aspects of Lemurian cosmology. In India, lineages of yogis guarded advanced techniques of energy manipulation. In China, Taoist traditions incorporated Lemurian understandings about harmonization between microcosm and macrocosm. A particularly fascinating aspect of this legacy is Lemurian crystals. Unlike common crystals, these present specific formations, lateral striations, and precise geometric patterns that contemporary practitioners identify as information codes. Found primarily in Brazil, these crystals are considered living libraries, programmed by Lemurian priests to preserve specific knowledge until humanity was ready to receive it again. The esoteric tradition also speaks of a hierarchy of advanced beings, often called ascended masters, who keep the flame of Lemurian knowledge alive. These beings, having transcended the limitations of the incarnation cycle, operate as guardians of human evolution, releasing aspects of ancestral knowledge when collective consciousness reaches specific development points. Rudolf Steiner, in his lectures on Lemuria, describes how certain individuals today carry karmic seeds from their Lemurian incarnations. These people feel a natural affinity with specific spiritual practices and frequently experience spontaneous memories or insights that cannot be explained by their current formal education. These reincarnated Lemurians play important roles in reintroducing aspects of ancestral knowledge into contemporary consciousness. One of Lemuria's most significant legacies manifests through shamanic traditions that survived in indigenous cultures around the world. The practices of communication with nature spirits, journeys between dimensions, and energy healing preserved by these traditions reflect, albeit in fragmented form, aspects of the Lemurian spiritual system. Particularly in Pacific Islands, certain ritual practices maintain direct connections with Lemurian ceremonies. In Tamil literature from India, we find references to Kumari Kandam, an advanced land that disappeared under the ocean. Texts such as the Tolkappiyam contain descriptions of a sophisticated civilization that many esoteric scholars identify as preserved memories of Lemuria. These traditions suggest that parts of southern India were colonized by Lemurian refugees, who brought with them advanced knowledge of astronomy, medicine, and spirituality. The Lemurian scrolls, channeled by Satguru Sivaya Subramunia Swami, offer a fascinating perspective on how Lemurian knowledge influenced the development of yoga and Hindu meditative practices. According to these texts, many yoga postures and breathing techniques weren't developed experimentally, but received directly from the Lemurian tradition through elevated states of consciousness. A little discussed aspect of the Lemurian legacy relates to architectural patterns found in ancient structures around the world. Certain geometric elements recurring in temples of India, Egypt, Central America, and Polynesia reflect principles of Lemurian sacred geometry, proportion systems that facilitate the channeling of specific cosmic energies. These structures function as consciousness technologies, amplifying meditative states and facilitating transcendental experiences. In the modern era, the resurgence of interest in Lemuria coincides with what many traditions identify as a planetary awakening, a period of evolutionary acceleration in which aspects of ancestral knowledge return to collective consciousness. This process occurs not just through intellectual studies, but primarily through the activation of cellular memories and attunement to Akashic libraries. Have you experienced a sensation of deep recognition when coming into contact with certain spiritual teachings? Have you felt that you were remembering rather than learning? This might be your personal connection with the Lemurian legacy awakening in your current consciousness. But how can we distinguish between fantasy and authentic memory when exploring these ancestral connections? How does Lemurian knowledge concretely manifest in contemporary spiritual practices? These questions lead us to the next level of our exploration. Today, various spiritual practices incorporate, consciously or not, elements of Lemurian knowledge. These approaches offer tangible paths for reconnection with this ancestral wisdom, transcending mere historical speculation to provide direct transformative experiences. Crystal meditation represents one of the most accessible bridges to Lemurian knowledge. Particularly the so-called Lemurian seed crystals, characterized by natural horizontal striations on their faces, are considered repositories of coded information. The practice involves holding these crystals during deep meditative states, allowing the crystalline frequencies to interact with the human energy field. Practitioners report spontaneous visions of Lemurian landscapes, downloads of technical information about energy manipulation, and activation of dormant psychic capabilities. Work with sacred sounds constitutes another significant path. The mantras and vocal intonations preserved in traditions such as Tibetan harmonic chanting and certain Hawaiian practices derive directly from Lemurian sound technologies. These sound sequences weren't intellectually composed, but received in altered states of consciousness, preserving specific vibratory patterns that restructure the human energy field and activate dormant codes in DNA. Reconnection with Lemuria also manifests through contemporary energy healing practices. Systems like Reiki, particularly in their less structured and more intuitive forms, recover aspects of the Lemurian understanding of direct energy field manipulation. The ability to channel energy through the hands and direct its vibratory quality for specific purposes reflects consciousness technologies that were natural for Lemurians. In recent decades, spiritual facilitators have emerged who identify themselves as reincarnated Lemurian priests or priestesses. While discernment is necessary in this field, some of these individuals demonstrate extraordinary abilities to access specific information about Lemurian technologies, offering energy activation techniques that produce verifiable results in their students. Reconnection with Lemuria often occurs through significant dream experiences. Recurring dreams of underwater landscapes, crystal temples, or ceremonies in unknown languages may represent cellular memories emerging during the altered state of consciousness of sleep. Some contemporary spiritual traditions have developed specific techniques to incubate and interpret these dreams, using them as portals for recovering ancestral knowledge. An intriguing phenomenon related to Lemurian memory is spontaneous glossolalia, the ability to speak or sing in unknown languages during deep meditative states. Linguists who have analyzed recordings of these episodes have identified consistent patterns that don't correspond to known languages, but present coherent grammatical structure. Some esoteric researchers suggest that these manifestations represent fragments of the Lemurian language emerging from cellular memory. The connection with Lemuria also expresses itself through contemporary visionary art. Artists working in altered states of consciousness frequently produce images of Lemurian landscapes, beings, and technologies without prior exposure to literary descriptions of these elements. The consistency of these representations among artists who haven't had contact with each other suggests access to a shared informational field. Possibly, the Akashic records mentioned in esoteric traditions. In Hawaiian traditions, practices such as huna preserve aspects of Lemurian spirituality adapted to the Polynesian cultural context. Techniques like the Ha rite, conscious breathing combined with visualization, derive directly from Lemurian practices of energy manipulation. Hawaiian kahunas frequently identify themselves as guardians of lineages that trace directly back to Lemuria. A controversial but fascinating aspect of Lemurian reconnection involves specific geographic locations considered portals, or energy nodes, connected to the submerged continent. Regions such as Mount Shasta in California, parts of Kauai in Hawaii, and certain areas of Machu Picchu in the Andes are identified as points where the veil between dimensions is thinner, facilitating communication with aspects of Lemurian consciousness that exist outside linear space-time. Have you ever visited a place that awakened inexplicable memories or sensations of deep familiarity in you? Have you experienced significant synchronicities related to Lemurian symbols or concepts? Share your experiences in the comments. The community of spiritual seekers often discovers surprising connections through these exchanges. But perhaps the most important question isn't just how to recover Lemurian knowledge, but why this process is occurring now. What does the emergence of these ancestral memories mean for our current collective evolution? This reflection leads us to the final chapter of our exploration. Lemurian knowledge returns not merely as an echo of the past, but as a call to the future. A future where humanity recovers lost capabilities and transcends limitations we've accepted as inevitable. Suf Edgar Mitchell, astronaut and founder of the Institute of Noetic Sciences. The resurgence of interest in Lemuria at this specific moment in human history is not coincidence, but part of a larger process of planetary transformation. Various spiritual traditions from apparently unrelated origins converge in predicting that we're entering a period of evolutionary acceleration, often called planetary ascension or dimensional shift. This transformation involves not only changes in individual human consciousness, but fundamental shifts in the very energy fields that sustain physical reality. Scientific measurements document alterations in the Schumann resonance, Earth's electromagnetic heartbeat, which have intensified in recent decades. These vibratory changes facilitate access to states of consciousness previously available only through intensive spiritual practices. Lemurian memory awakens now because it represents an evolutionary model necessary for our next phase of development. The Lemurians mastered precisely the capabilities we need to recover: harmonious integration with natural systems, natural multidimensional perception, and conscious utilization of technologies based on subtle energy rather than gross physical manipulation. A fascinating aspect of this process is what some mystics call the New Lemuria, not a literal recreation of the physical continent, but the emergence of globally distributed communities that incorporate Lemurian principles adapted to the contemporary context. These communities develop sustainable living systems, spiritual practices integrated into daily life, and technologies that work with natural forces rather than against them. Crystals play a crucial role in this transition. Beyond the already mentioned Lemurian crystals, recent discoveries of unusual crystalline formations in various parts of the world coincide with specific energy activations predicted in channeled texts. These crystal structures function as processors that help anchor and distribute the new energy frequencies necessary for planetary transformation. Reconnection with Lemuria also manifests through children born in recent decades who demonstrate extraordinary characteristics, often labeled indigo, crystal, or rainbow in spiritualist literature. These children naturally present advanced psychic capabilities, intuitive understanding of complex systems, and an innate connection with non-physical dimensions of reality. characteristics that mirror descriptions of Lemurians at their evolutionary peak. A particularly significant phenomenon is the spontaneous activation of what esoteric traditions call the light body, an energy structure that transcends the limitations of the physical body and serves as a vehicle for consciousness in higher dimensions. Spiritual practitioners around the world report consistent experiences of energy transformations occurring with unprecedented intensity and speed, often accompanied by visions or information downloads related to Lemuria. The integration of Lemurian knowledge into contemporary science represents another fascinating aspect of this awakening. Emerging fields, such as epigenetics, which studies how environmental factors influence genetic expression, validate Lemurian understandings about the fluid and responsive nature of DNA. Quantum physics, particularly in interpretations that recognize the role of consciousness in the manifestation of reality, approaches the Lemurian cosmology that saw mind and matter as different expressions of a unified field. Indigenous traditions play a crucial role in this transition, serving as living bridges to aspects of Lemurian knowledge. Elders from various native cultures, particularly in the Pacific and the Americas, are openly sharing teachings previously reserved only for initiates, recognizing that the evolutionary moment has come for this dissemination. Reconnection with Lemuria doesn't represent a nostalgic regression to an idealized past, but a spiral integration that incorporates the best of multiple evolutionary cycles. We don't abandon the valid achievements of our current civilization, but transcend its limitations through the recovery of capabilities and understandings that were temporarily set aside for the development of specific aspects of human experience. The invitation to consciously participate in this process is open to all. Each individual who awakens to these possibilities becomes an active node in the emerging energy network, contributing to collective transformation through their own journey of consciousness expansion. Do you feel the call of Lemuria resonating within you? Do you notice synchronicities increasing in your life, guiding you to practices and knowledge that awaken deep memories? This isn't escapist fantasy, but recognition of your role in the unfolding of a greater cosmic plan. The promise we made at the beginning of this video was to reveal how Lemurian knowledge can transform your current spiritual journey. This transformation occurs through the conscious integration of three fundamental principles of Lemurian consciousness. First, multidimensional perception. The Lemurians didn't see the physical world as the only reality, but as a dense expression of more subtle energy fields. By practicing techniques such as crystal meditation, sacred sound work, and conscious visualization, you can gradually restore this natural ability to perceive beyond the material veil. Second, direct communication with natural intelligences. Lemurians didn't dominate nature, but consciously collaborated with the devas, elementals, and higher consciousnesses that govern natural processes. Through practices such as meditation in natural environments, conscious offerings, and development of subtle sensitivity, you can re-establish these ancestral connections. Third, activation of spiritual DNA. Lemurians understood that the human genetic code contains dormant potentials that transcend known biological functions. Through specific practices of breathing, movement, and energy focusing, you can activate aspects of this genetic potential, manifesting capabilities that conventional science considers impossible. The awakening of Lemuria represents not just a rediscovery of the past, but a seed for a radically different future. A future where humanity integrates advanced technology with deep spiritual wisdom, where individual consciousness recognizes itself as an inseparable part of planetary consciousness, and where barriers between dimensions become as fluid as they were for our Lemurian ancestors. Which aspect of Lemurian knowledge resonates most deeply with you? Conscious energy manipulation? Communication with subtle realms? Harmonious integration with natural cycles? Share your experience in the comments below. Your unique perspective might be exactly what another seeker needs to advance in their own awakening journey. If this video awakened significant memories or insights for you, consider exploring our other content on ancestral wisdom and spiritual evolution. The journey of reconnection with Lemuria isn't a solitary path, but a collective adventure of rediscovery and transformation. Lemuria isn't just a lost continent in the ocean depths, it's a living possibility within each of us, waiting to be rediscovered and manifested again. The veil between worlds is becoming thinner, and knowledge that was once sealed is now accessible to those who seek with open hearts and receptive minds. The question isn't whether Lemuria existed, but how its wisdom can transform our existence now. Humanity's future isn't written in the stars, but in the choices we make today, informed by the ancestral wisdom awakening in our collective consciousness. The time of Lemuria returns, not as repetition, but as evolutionary spiral. And you, dear seeker, are an integral part of this grand planetary awakening.